Some families are built on a social ladder. There's the top of said ladder, the de facto leader, someone the family listens to, despite maybe questionable intentions or lack of foresight. And on the other end of the spectrum, or bottom of that ladder, is the one that everyone either ignores or bashes, deserved or not. Someone who is maybe even treated as less than human. For American Dad's Smith family, that's Clouse, their pet goldfish. And I use the term pet loosely. You'd think for a goldfish there wouldn't be much to unpack, but you would be wrong. Through the laughter, the tears, the wholesome and dark moments, I don't think anybody could have predicted this character's trajectory. So join me as we dive into a deeper look at A Fish Called Klaus.
You know what I played when I was a kid? Steal Grandpa's Playboys. And the goal was to jerk off.
Folks, before we start the video, I want to talk about the current situation in LA. As I'm sure you know by now, the wildfires in Los Angeles have caused unprecedented destruction in multiple areas. I called Los Angeles my home for 11 years, and seeing so many friends be affected by this terrifying disaster has been really difficult. Tons of folks in the animation industry have been affected as well, and I wanted to share this document with a list of donation pages and encourage anyone watching to give if they can. Truly, any amount helps. Many of these folks have lost their homes or have been displaced for extended periods of time, and if every one of you gave just $1, it would make a massive difference. Check the link in the description if you can. Thanks so much. Let's start the video.
You set me up, Klaus! Why would you do something so awful?
I'm German. It's what we do.
Unlike its sister show Family Guy, where animals can sometimes talk just because, there's actually a reason as to why Klaus is able to talk in American Dad.
I was an Olympic skier before the CIA switched my brain with a goldfish.
Hey, I didn't say it was a good reason. Yes, before he became a goldfish, Klaus Heisler was a world-renowned East German Olympic ski jumper, something he's very passionate about.
I want to ski jump again. Soaring through the air. I've never been so happy, so alive.
He even created a complex and deadly jump that would have surely secured him the gold medal at the 1986 Winter Olympics, until, of course, the CIA kidnapped him and put his brain in a fish's body. Surprisingly, despite being a main character, there's not a lot else we know about Klaus's life before he became a fish, and the little we do get is very telling as to the kind of person Klaus really is. For example, we learn about his favorite show growing up, Giernot and Strudel. Unfortunately, the show is forever shrouded in a dark cloud due to an incident with his erection, his words not mine.
And when I was a child, I had a very sharp penis. It wasn't big, but it was honed, like a paring knife.
In Live and Let Fry, we find out that Klaus had a massive gambling problem and owed a lot of money to the East German mafia, who tried to lure him out with a phony inheritance scheme. And other than an occasional fling or two, and that he studied psychology at Frankfurt University, that's basically all we have about Klaus's human life pre-goldfish body. That said, we still do learn a few more tidbits through throwaway lines and B-plots. For example, later on in the series, we find out that Klaus took a semester abroad at Arizona State.
ASU's got everything. It was ranked #1 in innovation. By who? By the rankers!
We'll touch a bit more on that later. He's also noticeably proud of his German heritage to an aggressive level at some points.
Fishing, hiking. Oh, you could make Spätzle by the fire.
I don't know what that is, but s'mores sound really good.
It was my idea. I own camping. If you don't make Spätzle, you can't go camping.
We're going camping and we're not making Spätzle.
I hope you die out there!
It's also important to Klaus that those around him have a good grasp of German culture as well. Like when he, Steve, and Snot are about to watch Das Boot, he continually interrupts to explain German folklore and tradition, refusing to let them watch until they have full Germanian context.
You don't know the meaning of Lebensspiel?
Stop asking questions!
And of course, as it comes with the territory, there are plenty of jokes and bits related to Klaus being, well, you know.
Men younger than us, boys, really.
Just boys trying to fight off an American invasion.
I was talking about the Americans.
The biggest overarching story for Klaus, despite coming up relatively infrequently, is his understandable desire to get back into a human body. Becoming human again to experience life's simple joys is one of his main motivations early on in the show. You know, wanting to wear clothes or wanting to get a haircut.
It's terrible, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yes! It's awful! It's so awful!
He actually does sort of manage to get a human body a few times, including but not limited to a nun, a puppet, Stan himself,
Oh my god, Klaus is in Dad's body.
the frontman of an Earth, Wind & Fire cover band, the family car, and somehow his old human body, if we take the episode of Ice and Men at face value.
Hold on a second. You were a fish. Don't you think that's a better story than two grown-ups ice skating?
Quick side tangent, but I love how every single human design of Clouse has his hair styled to make him look like a goldfish. It's a really fun choice, and maybe evidence that Clouse is just meant to be a fish, because every time, he always ends up back in that fish body. With all of these failures, you'd think that maybe he would change course and try a new approach to handling the situation, and as the show goes on, he does manage to pull this off, but in a way I don't think anyone could have predicted. To understand what I mean, we have to dive further into Clouse's character and personality across the series and how he managed to pull a complete 180 in how fans perceive him, something that almost wasn't meant to be.
This thing is never charged.
I may get pushback, but I stand by my claim that Clouse is a main character. He's a member of the Smith family, he has that continuous serialized goal of obtaining a human body, and in the intro, he tosses Stan his keys. What more could you ask of anyone?
Klaus!
Jawohl!
Get ready to flip me my car keys with your tail like you do every morning.
I've been ready for 3 hours!
However, if you haven't seen a lot of American Dad, I wouldn't blame you for thinking otherwise. For literally the first, 8 seasons, they do almost nothing with Clouse. He's not completely in the background, and he gets a respectable number of B stories throughout that run, but he's rarely the central focus, often feeling like an afterthought, forgotten by everybody.
Is everyone okay? Steve? Haley? Roger?
Everyone's fine.
And I genuinely do mean everybody, even the writers and audience.
Ha ha ha! I made it into the episode. Pay me, bitches.
Arguably, his first starring role in an A story was Season 2's Finances with Wolves, where Stan puts his brain into that Earth, Wind, and Fire cover band frontman's body so that he can help cook for him while Francine is busy running her muffin kiosk. What a plotline.
There's no time to lose.
That'll be $3.
What? That's a total rip. I'll park it myself.
But that didn't even happen until over halfway through the episode, and he sort of plays the role of Stan's antagonist in that one. Plus, he had to share the spotlight with 3 other subplots. But I think Klaus's first real starring role is in the episode Dr. Klaustus, 6 seasons after Finances with Wolves, and 8 seasons deep into the series. Crazy. We'll talk about this one more later, but I wanted to give you an idea of just how little Clouse was utilized early on. But it's his lack of memorability mixed with his unique predicament that shapes Klaus's main personality traits of the early years: depression and isolation.
I'm so lonely. I haven't felt the touch of another human being in 6 years. I just want to be held.
And anybody in Klaus's situation would probably not be stoked about it. Stuck in a tiny glass water prison, can't say I really blame him for feeling the way he does, especially when the only people he can talk to leave the house whenever they want. It's not surprising that he talks to his plastic scuba man from time to time.
I have the money. I have way more money than that even. I don't have very much money.
As I mentioned, most of that depression and isolation stems from his inability to enjoy basic activities, especially ones of a sensual nature. In fact, he gets so desperate at one point that in the episode White Rice, he wants an actual fish to move into his bowl for companionship.
Wait, why don't you drop her in my bowl?
Wow, look at you. Hooking up with a colored girl.
They even get married and start a family, don't think too hard about it.
She has no maternal instincts.
She can't be that bad.
She ate 3 of the children.
And all of these sad realities boil into Klaus's streak of attempted suicides, which, while dark, is mostly played for laughs.
Oh, it's 3:30.
Clouse is extremely bitter and resentful about his fish body, which again is totally understandable, but that toxicity also seeps into his everyday life, even when he's trying to make the most of the normal things that he can do.
How do you know so much about hexes?
I do a lot of reading because, I sit in a bowl all day.
Sometimes this vitriol and anger even combines with those suicidal tendencies, just so you can truly appreciate the whole experience.
Klaus, no, it's not worth it!
For your crimes!
I mean, let's be honest, Clouse is a weird character, so it's not hard to see why he rarely takes the spotlight, despite a healthy number of B stories and some genuinely funny bits even during his depressing moments.
Never cry over a horse, Steve. Never! Mama.
But I think it's pretty understandable why the writers didn't give him much focus, if any. In seasons 8 and 9, we got 2 episodes where Clouse actually was the central focus of the main plot. These are extremely solid stories that explore Klaus's relationship with the Smith family and how the Smith family views him.
Plus, Clouse finally gets the better of Stan's whole man-in-charge role, but by the end of season 10, Fox decided not to renew American Dad for an 11th season. And though TBS would soon pick up the show for future seasons, in that small window of cancellation, this was a 10-season show in which only 2 episodes of its 175-episode run gave Clouse the spotlight, compared to the next 10 seasons on TBS, in which we would get a whopping 16 episodes with Clouse as the main focus. Look, it still doesn't seem like much, but it's 8 times what the original run gave us. Kind of insane. And that's not even including the countless number of B stories that he often overtook compared to the Fox run. You might be wondering, how do you make that many episodes with the same depressing jokes and similar character beats? Well, the answer is, you don't.
Ricky Spanish is back! And it's all thanks to Klaus. Who's your least favorite character now, Reddit?
There isn't really one exact moment where we can pinpoint when this change happened, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who disagrees that Clouse was a completely different character on TBS than he was on Fox. Clouse's defining traits of depression and isolation haven't been completely abandoned.
I'm struggling with depression. I'm in the darkest place I've ever been.
However, they've either been massively subdued, only to be brought up occasionally, or they've been channeled into other avenues for Clouse's character, some of which we'll talk about soon. Honestly, forget everything you know about Fox-era Clouse, because he's new and improved. Now, he's a college dude bro who thinks he's the raddest guy on the block. Thinks he is. He's actually lame as hell.
Klaus changed your Spotify playlist to a Mark Maron podcast from 2015.
His guest is a comedian you've never heard of.
But more importantly, he rolls with the punches life throws at him rather than being beaten down by them. Now he fully embraces who he is, sort of like how Meg is treated in later seasons of Family Guy, but with Clouse, it's kind of ramped up to 11. So why'd they make this change? There isn't a concrete answer, but I have a few ideas. For starters, Clouse remaining a depressed loner definitely limited the writers and story possibilities. Second, and this is probably the most subjective reason, I think the writers wanted to flex D. Bradley Baker's voice acting skills. He's easily one of the most underrated voice actors of our time, and Clouse is definitely one of his crown jewels. There's just something about the way he says the names of places as Clouse that kills me.
My true love works in Roanoke. They've got the best Jersey Mikes. It's a match made in heaven!
And lastly, and most importantly, this was when the writers abandoned the human body motivations, making Clouse content with living out the rest of his life as a fish. In the episode A Nice Night for a Drive, Clouse is diagnosed with a fatal fish disease, and is more insistent on going to the vet to fix him as opposed to finding a new human body. Well, he also learns that the CAA doesn't have any more human bodies.
Great thought. Unfortunately, we don't have bodies just lying around like we used to. They shred them now.
And yet, in this era, Clouse is somehow able to live out his life however he chooses. How might a fish be capable of this, you ask? Well, the way I see it, Clouse is no longer written as a man trapped in a fish's body. He's now written as a man who happens to be in a fish's body. What I mean by that is, at least in the writing process, Clouse is treated as just another normal person who's able to do normal, everyday things. How is he able to get from place to place with seemingly no hassle? Well, don't worry about it. Seriously, the show never gives any explanation outside of a few jokes, like a telescoping driving cane and an orange Nissan hardbody that he won in a competition.
I'll drive.
Where does one buy a telescoping driving cane?
Eddie Bauer.
Oh.
But otherwise, the why kind of just doesn't matter. It's for the best that they keep this sense of mystery to his character, since it opens up story possibilities and adds a lot to the overall comedy. Want to make Clouse a lineman for an episode for no particular reason? As long as he's still got a cup of water with him, why the hell not?
I don't care.
Not so fast, Stan. I control everything from up here.
How did you make me answer the phone?
This new and improved Clouse is brimming with confidence, aligning with his college dude bro attitude adjustment. Seriously, the amount of boys that Clouse has on hand just seems to increase every single episode. He's got his boys down in Tampa, his posse in Vegas, his bros at ASU, his crew out in Chicago, his gang of lunch ladies, the list goes on. And that's not even to mention his single connections like Chet from 7-Eleven, Jurgen, somehow Shaq and Yao Ming. He even has Gucci Mane on speed dial. That is one connected fish.
You need to get to the studio right now!
Your girl wants me, Gucci Mane.
You're getting clowned, Gucci Mane!
This also leads to an overinflated ego and an overinflated sense of self-worth. Clouse really thinks he's all that and a side of chips.
a fish and chips, if you will. This, alongside a cavalcade of other issues, leads him to believe that the most mundane, boring, and ludicrously skeevy things are dope as hell as long as he's involved. It can basically be summed up with one clip.
I just want to give you an update on the K-Dog's adventures in Scientology. It works. I realized that Battlefield Earth is a cool movie.
Clouse even had the opportunity to become a rap legend with his single Guppy Love, which he of course managed to screw up by focusing on the mundanity of his life. Still managed to make it into the greatest hits album though, so maybe he has an in with somebody on the crew.
Thanks, Steve. See you later.
What? He called me. He asked me to come down here. Why?
As I mentioned earlier though, the series doesn't completely do away with his sense of depression and isolation. Nowadays it's mostly channeled into other avenues. For example, thanks to how he's treated by the family and how he viewed himself early on, he's not particularly well versed in speaking to or treating women well.
Welcome back to my podcast, Clouse of Hearts, where we explore every interaction I've had with a woman at a blackjack table. Today, we'll be looking at Pachanga Casino on Christmas Eve, where dealer Janice F. refused to answer the simple icebreaker question, don't you think it's time to forgive Kevin Spacey?
There's a running gag throughout the back half of the show where Clouse has a major crush on Haley's friend, Danuta, and it's kinda mutual, but no matter how many chances he gets, he finds new ways to screw it up, whether that be lashing out at her or, well...
Hello?
Danuta.
Who is this?
Danuta.
Who's calling?
It is me.
What?
Will you go there?
Go where? What?
Do you eat?
What the hell is this?
I've got the money. Danuta.
But Clouse doesn't only act this way around women, he's also awkward around those closest to him. At least those closest to him in his head. In the episode Damn Stan, it's revealed that he's been pretending that the boy from the Country Time Lemonade commercial is his actual son, complete with height milestone marks showing how tall he thinks that he's grown over the years, to keep up the charade. And when he gets the opportunity to actually meet and talk with the real guy, who is absolutely willing to have Clouse as a father figure, he fumbles.
I'm lonely, and maybe you are too. And maybe together, we won't have to be.
How tall are you?
I think this is an important piece of the puzzle for Clouse's character change, and his rise in popularity. Sure, other people's perceptions of him don't help, but his failures, his shortcomings, all of his insecurities about isolation, in this era of the show, are Clouse's own fault. He's self-sabotaging, and he's too blind to see it. It's why the character works so much more as a bottom rung of society character now. It's a lot harder to be the butt of the joke when you're in on the joke yourself. All of these different little personality bits, his inflated sense of self-worth, his surprising amount of testosterone/dude bro attitude, and his overall feelings of depression and isolation that lead to self-sabotage are also the cause of another little quirk of Clouse's. He is a little bit of a sociopath, possibly bordering on being outright evil at times. Now, I know what you're thinking. No one who speaks German could be evil, but hear me out.
Wait, you came back from Jewish camp?
Clouse has a lot of anger. This can range from quick to the trigger anger or cold, calculated, seething rage that is satiated through meticulous, vengeful planning. He has a laundry list of nefarious deeds that he's at least attempted, so just to give you an idea of what he's done, I'm gonna rapid fire off a few. He knowingly infected Steve with ick so that the two of them could hang out, then tried to do the same to Haley. He sent Roger to fight in Iraq with a phony draft letter. He left Rogu to die in a mineshaft after framing him for letting Aranch's mule escape. He almost blew up Stan's mural after Stan didn't look at his comic book. He kept Steve held hostage and forced him to watch his stand-up bits. He turned the family into puppets and held them hostage to keep acting out episodes of his favorite show for him. According to him, he stabbed a bunch of people in Italy, and last but not least, he killed 3 teenagers in a car accident.
Don't tell anyone.
And somehow, that isn't even the worst thing he's done. In the episode Beyond the Alcove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Clouse, he manages to brainwash the entire town of Langley Falls into loving and worshipping him. He even figures out how to make the hypnosis stick if they've snapped out of it.
You hypnotized Jeff or something?
Is it that obvious?
I'm over this.
No, wait!
And that is the other piece of the puzzle to how Clouse has been able to thrive in the TBS era. He is his own worst enemy, and at the same time, he deserves every moment of his inevitable downfalls. They somehow managed to craft this character into a lame, chauvinistic, manipulative, self-sabotaging douchebag, while also making him one of the most endearing characters on the show, for the viewers at least.
Wanna watch me play Elden Ring? I'm an astrologer, but like
a battle astrologer.
And somehow, we haven't even scratched the surface of Klaus's character, because the most important question is yet to be answered. What exactly is Klaus's relationship with the Smiths?
Oh, shit. You know what? I'm not gonna push the conversation. I'm just gonna chalk this up as a W.
Shut up, Klaus!
And I broke even.
Quiet, Klaus!
And I blew it.
Klaus is not your typical family pet. I think that's been more than established by now. However, his relationship with the Smith family has an extra layer of irony. If you want to get technical, Klaus is the Smiths' hostage, forced to live with them against his will, and any positive feelings that he has towards them could be considered textbook Stockholm Syndrome. But outside of the occasional reminder that Klaus is trapped in a fish's body, the show never really goes out of its way to dive further into this. And so, neither will I.
What? They're gonna ask at Comic-Con. We better have an answer.
Let's just get this out of the way. The family as a whole treats Klaus as subhuman at points. Constant neglect, physical and emotional abuse, there's really no limit.
What about me?
You can't be a pet unless someone loves you.
Despite this, Klaus seems to be the one the family members are constantly dragging along on their little adventures, mostly to have someone to talk to. Strangely enough, even from the beginning of the series, Klaus never seemed to hold any ill will towards the family, despite the way that they treat him. In fact, more often than not, he seems to want to help the family wherever he can, whether that be because of his psych degree or because he genuinely cares about them. No episode showcases this more than Dr. Klaustus. One of the biggest problems with how the family treats Klaus is that they don't recognize him as human, despite being a man trapped in a fish's body. And, I mean, yeah, I see what he means.
I don't do anything Monday nights.
Well, you clean my bowl on Monday nights.
Humans are talking!
Dr. Klaustus looks to finally rectify that issue, at least for a little bit. In this one, the entire Smith family goes to Roger for therapy via his therapist persona, Dr. Penguin. It turns out that each one of them is hiding a dark secret from someone else in the family, and his advice isn't exactly sage.
And you need to keep lying.
What?
Eventually it'll become second nature and you'll stop feeling guilty.
Despite this, everyone listens to Roger, and Klaus is over it, especially because he actually knows how to solve all of their issues. So he forges a fake draft letter, sends Roger to Iraq, and becomes the de facto family therapist. But when nobody comes to see him, he airs everyone's secrets out in hopes of clearing things up. The results are not exactly as kumbaya as he hoped.
That malnourished pasty geek! I knew I should have aborted him!
Goodness.
Quick side tangent, but comparing the weight of these secrets makes this comment pretty ironically funny. Like, Steve hid his girlfriend from his mom and dad in fear of being embarrassed by them, versus Francine stealing money from Stan for drugs. I wonder which one's worse. Anyways, the family turns against each other and still won't listen to Klaus's attempts at resolution, so he has no choice but to bring Roger home from Iraq so that Dr. Penguin can talk some sense into them. He does not.
Everybody go back to lying to each other.
That's not gonna work.
Oh. Well, that's my only thing. I can't help you.
Just as all hope seems lost, Klaus and Roger find the answer. While Klaus does have great problem-solving skills, because he's a fish, the family won't give him the time of day. So Roger just regurgitates Klaus's advice to the family, and when they actually listen, they make peace with one another. And most importantly, thanks to Roger crediting him, it seems like the family finally realizes that Klaus is a man worthy of listening to.
Sometimes we forget you are a man in a fish's body.
Oh, it feels so good to finally be validated.
Does this sentiment last throughout the rest of the show? Not really. After all, it is an episodic comedy, but I will say, in general, after this, Klaus's voice is heard more often and he's treated more like an individual. The next time things get this bad is in No Weddings and a Funeral, in which somehow the situation is worse and the moral is darker.
Klaus is in the disposal!
Tell that idiot pieces of shit are supposed to go in the toilet!
In the show's first and only full-on future episode to date, Klaus decides to leave the family after years of abuse and neglect, citing lack of respect as the reason for his departure. And given the family's reaction, I can see where he's coming from. Flash forward to 15 years later, and we see a pretty dark future for the Smith family. Stan and Francine are divorced, Francine marries Toshi thinking he was snot, and Stan spirals more and more.
Hey! You know the deal. Neither of us gets to do it until I can afford a second bullet.
Meanwhile, Steve is a successful tech entrepreneur, but he's so lonely that he invents a jerk-off robot, not in the way that you're thinking, and Haley and Jeff have kids, but one of them is a little messed up. They kind of just glossed over her life, but the point is that they're all pretty miserable, and more importantly, they've all lost touch with one another. However, sad news brings them all under the same roof once more. Klaus has passed, and a nun who spent her last moments with Klaus has asked the family to put together a funeral for him to show how much they care. And they really don't.
I bet you always wondered what happened to good old Klaus.
Nope.
Not me.
Oh, that Klaus!
However, this all turns out to be a ruse. Clouse is still alive, his mind is in the nun's body, and he tries to make the family feel sorrow and remorse for his loss so that he can finally receive the overdue apology for the way that they treated him. This goes about as well as you'd expect.
Oh, here's one with Klaus in the background.
That's a tangerine.
We'll just draw some eyes on it.
Clouse is so infuriated by the reaction that he takes the ultimate form of revenge, trapping everyone in fish body. Only then do they realize how important Clouse is to the family. But unlike in Dr. Klaustus, where they value Klaus's advice and genuinely respect him, his perceived importance comes in a different form. They realized that ripping on Clouse during the funeral was the first time they'd actually connected and had fun with each other in 15 years. You know, the exact amount of time that's passed since Clouse left. I'm sure you're piecing it together.
Klaus is the glue that holds his family together!
Klaus is incredibly important because he sucks so much. Thank you.
Yep, that's the big takeaway of this one. Klaus's ability to act as a lightning rod to attract all of the negative feelings of the family is why he's so important. At face value, this could be seen as analogous to Family Guy's Seahorse Seashell Party, where Meg goes through a similar development, but I actually think American Dad's attempt is far more successful. Looking at this in the context of the show at the time, Klaus was at a point where, despite having an overinflated ego, he legitimately just wanted to feel like he was important to the family. And technically, he got his wish. He's the glue. The end of the episode actually parallels the events of the beginning, where Klaus is going into the trash disposal. But unlike the beginning, where he's scared and sad, this time he's fully along for the ride, happy to have cemented a place for himself within the family. Whether that's a happy ending or not, that's up for interpretation. We've seen plenty of cases where Klaus is used and abused by the family, but I'm not going to pretend like he doesn't deserve at least some of that hate. He's not exactly innocent in all of this, constantly making the family's life harder with his shenanigans. I mentioned how he trapped the family in puppets in Gearnot and Strudel, but as for other examples, he pulled painful pranks on the family and posted them to his website in klaustastrophe.tv.
Epic fail!
In Men 2 Boys, he tricked Stan, Roger, and Jeff into throwing him a bachelor party for a wedding that he never even had, and kept prolonging the events of the night by getting them into riskier situations.
Oh no! They must have killed Shoshana because we're late!
Okay, so we have a pretty good idea of how Klaus is with the family as a whole, but how is he with each individual member of the family? Well, on a positive note, for once, other than arguably one member, I don't think anyone in the family outright hates Klaus. Sure, they razz him from time to time, but there is earnest emotion from both ends. Starting with the patriarch, you'd think that Klaus has the most negative feelings for Stan, given that he's the reason that he's stuck in a fish body. And to be fair, there are instances when this is the case. Like with Da Flippity Flop, where the CIA finds Klaus's body, and he wants back in, obviously. Sadly, thanks to Stan's carelessness, the body is already decomposing. So Klaus steals Stan's body and traps Stan in the fish.
I love America, and we're #1 no matter what. Yippee!
Okay, I admit, it's a pretty good impression.
In the episode A Nice Night for a Drive, Stan refuses to pay for Klaus's life-saving procedure, so he transfers his consciousness into Stan's new smart car.
We're going back to the CIA to put you in something that's around me less. Maybe something in the basement.
Though in both of those instances, Stan was the instigator, as his general lack of caring caused Klaus to resort to drastic measures. For the majority of the time, however, Klaus and Stan are on relatively solid terms. I'd even go as far as to say that they're friends at this point. Sure, Stan will still do or say some mean stuff to Klaus, and Klaus won't always be the nicest to Stan, but they get along pretty well.
I know I don't say it enough, Klaus, but you're a hell of a valet.
The way you shit on me in front of everyone and pretend we don't have this special connection is thank you enough.
It should be noted that basically all of the family members use Klaus as a sounding board, airing out their problems to him and expecting him to have a fix-all solution, despite their general lack of respect for him. And out of all of them, Stan is definitely the one who does this the most, which Klaus points out.
What do you think?
I think you only talk to me when there's no one else to turn to. I think you're a selfish bastard, and I think you can go to hell!
Wow. Okay.
By comparison, Klaus has a bit of a rockier relationship with Francine. In the beginning of the show, one of Klaus's other defining character traits was that he was infatuated with Francine. It was a running gag that he was constantly hitting on her inappropriately.
You know, perhaps when you are finished there, you would stick your naughty pinky finger into mine bowl and let me feel you.
This all comes to a head in Finances with Wolves, where Klaus's consciousness is put into the frontman of the Earth, Wind & Fire cover band, only to betray Stan by trying to get into Francine's pants. Unfortunately, this plan backfires and he is re-fished.
Now I know why they say, once you've been black, There's no going back.
After that, their relationship was pretty much platonic, and they're on relatively good terms now. There's the occasional episode where Francine gets angry at Clouse, like when he brainwashes the whole town, but they're pretty friendly for most of their on-screen presence together. Klaus's relationship with Steve is an interesting one. I'd say they're pretty friendly for the most part. However, I think it goes a little bit further. I'd argue that Clouse and Steve's relationship is akin to that of a father and son, or older and younger brother, where Clouse tries to teach Steve life lessons and help him out with his problems, which Steve accepts more often than not.
Really? You'd be my dad?
It would be mine honor. Now here's your allowance. 5 bubbles.
Haley and Clouse definitely have a strong relationship as well, particularly early on. Though ironically, I think that might primarily be due to the fact that they were the two least utilized characters in the show at the beginning. Still, it's a pretty fun relationship, and one that lasts throughout the rest of the show.
They say if you play it backwards, you can hear the voice of a dead kid.
Whoa. Wait, how do you play Monopoly backwards?
Surprisingly enough, arguably the strongest relationship he has is with Jeff. Shouldn't be too much of a shocker though, given that Jeff's the nicest guy in the whole series and gets along with everyone in the family, even those family members that hate him.
Haley, cover your ears. Daddy's gonna make a bang.
And I think that's where these two bond, because I'd say right above Klaus's rung on the ladder is Jeff's. It's actually surprising how many times the show focuses on them, but they make a surprisingly entertaining pair. I really like how the Scooby-Doo parody episode also focuses on the other family members, seeing them only for their most boiled down traits, and the two of them having to work together to prove them wrong.
Maybe we have always thought of you as just a stoner and a fish who says bro. But you two are full of surprises.
Now let's go home and smoke some weed.
Sounds good to me, bro.
But out of all the family members, no one has a more tumultuous relationship with Clouse than Roger. And that's me putting it very lightly. I mean, you cannot get more straightforward than this.
You can't participate, Klaus. I hate you. I say that not out of anger, but simply as a fact. It's 67 degrees outside, and I hate you.
Well, at least he's brutally honest. In spite of his hatred, Roger does use Clouse the same way as the rest of the family, whether that's as a sounding board or to tag along on their adventures, like when Roger and Clouse traveled through Europe or watched the odometer flip over. They were even a very short-lived, very disturbing thing in Clodger, where the two of them started a taboo relationship behind everyone else's back just for the thrill of it.
Does this make us gay?
God, no, I'm an alien. I wish people thought I was gay.
But yeah, for the most part, it is pure, unbridled, and unreciprocated hatred.
You know, Stanislavski says that acting is the grandest lie.
They actually tried to give a reason for Roger's bitter hatred of Clouse not too long ago in the episode Mused and Abused. We found out that Roger has constantly been shitting on Clouse for the sole purpose of artistic inspiration, Clouse being his muse. And the more upset Clouse gets, the more inspirational Roger's art becomes.
Yeah, I torture Klaus, crush his spirit, and then paint his sad face. Rinse, repeat.
How long have you been doing this?
Oh gosh, years?
When Clouse finds out about this, he leaves Roger and the family and starts a life of his own. And for the first time in a very long time, things are really looking up for Clouse. He's got a woman and child in his life and a very stable job that makes him happy, but when he runs into Roger again and sees how uninspired his art has become since he left, he falls into that self-sabotaging mode once again, making himself miserable just so Roger can create more inspired art.
I think it's cool because it's a statue of you, Dad.
You're an imbecile, Brandon.
And I think that's a pretty good note to wrap up this Clouse the Fish analysis. Clouse is a complex character, possibly the most complex in the whole show, except for maybe Roger, which started as a character who was really nothing more than a stressed, depressed, and isolated man trapped in a fish's body, turned into a chauvinistic, self-absorbed loser douchebag whose greatest enemy is himself. And yet, despite how I described him just now, he's easily one of the most loved characters in the entire show.
Smith, read this intel and give me a report by the end of the day.
On it, Chief.
Even if they don't outwardly show it, his family loves him, the characters love him, the crew loves him, the fans love him. I know I said this already, but I really have to give kudos to the crew for being able to write such a lovable and charismatic character who is also this much of an asshole. And to think we never would have even seen this side of Clouse had the show ended by season 10. He would have been slotted as easily one of the weakest characters in the series, and now, whenever the show does eventually come to an end, he'll probably be considered one of the best.
Time for Klaus to show how much of a man he really is.
I'm not very much of a man.
Folks, thanks for tuning in to my second American Dad video. This one was once again written by the great Dan the Man Show. Make sure to check out his channel for more American Dad videos and our other video on Avery Bullock. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny two cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.